Yeah. Here we are.
Yep.
And we missed last week. I'm glad to hear that you're feeling better and all that. It's kind of weird. I've gotten into such a routine or looking forward to Thursdays is when we record this. For those who don't know, usually it's a Thursday, it's kind of one of those weird things. Once you get it in the grind of it, it's like, man, I miss that. Just, I guess probably it's a little stress reliever.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's kind of like, therapy. You get to talk out all your angst.
Exactly. Speaking of angst, I don't know if you saw and I'll put a link to the article that I read, was the back in New York State.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to get on the ballot basically the Equal Rights Amendment,
Mm-hmm.
Women's Rights Amendment, whatever they call it. ERA, yeah, ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, but as part of that was the whole abortion component of it, right? So they want to get that so they codify it in their constitution, state constitution, and all that kind of stuff. But what was funny about it, and which just drives me crazy, and another reason I was thinking about, this is why third parties are important. And there is a third party component to this I'll get to. But as soon as Roe versus Wade got, overturned, New York legislature went in special session, did all this, passed all these laws. And you had to actually vote. They had to actually vote twice to get anything on the ballot. And then in their rush, they didn't follow their own rules. And so one of their rules is before anything can go onto the ballot, it has to, the state attorney general has to review it, provide a recommendation if it's legal or not, what they're trying to do, and all that kind of stuff. Well, they didn't get that opinion until after they approved it. Yeah. And so now what's aggravating, so that, those things happen. But what aggravated me about it is like, of course the Republicans seized upon it, right? And they went to court immediately. And the judge just this past week threw it out, saying, hey, you didn't follow the rules. You can't go on the ballot. And of course, the Democrats are just totally peeved. And now they're going back to court saying there's all these reasons why that's bogus and they shouldn't do it. And it's just an example of how, they're not so many, and it happens on both sides. Don't get me wrong. This just happens to be Democrats this time, where they don't walk the talk. They always talk about rule of law and we got to follow this and follow that until they do something screwy. Yeah, and then they want everybody to bend to their ways. And this is where a third party, I think, could play a good role in this. Is like, if you had enough people saying, well, so we don't have to go to court, because the whole court, the cost to go into court, and all this legal stuff, it's just so ridiculous. And I understand why the Republicans did it, but ultimately it's going to get passed in New York. Yeah. It's like California, it's going to get passed. So they're just doing this as a delay tactic and just to, poke the side of the Democrats, which I get. But the flip side of it is the Democrats didn't follow the rules. So,
right.
But it was a good example of where hopefully a third party, if there was enough of a third party together, it would just kind of bring some common sense to these kinds of things.
And it would
instead of rushing to judgment and doing this stuff and taking a time out. Abortion's not going away in New York anytime soon. Yeah. So let's do it right. And anyways, but I figured, I bet you'd appreciate that too, because it's like not mine, but mine.
It's such a simple thing too. And as they say, you say, you'd have to have enough of a third party presence. Well, that third party presence could have just been one person saying, hey, hang on. There's all these steps that we need to do. Let's just do them. We'll get this thing passed. It'll take a couple of months. The governor and the mayors and all the people who enforce the abortion laws don't want to enforce some abortion law from 1820 or whatever they were faced with happening after Roe v. Wade went down.
Right.
So they're not going to go out and start arresting people or whatever. Let's just get our ducks in a row, take a month, get the thing passed, do it the right way, and then we're done with it.
Yep.
And it's easy. Yep. But because everything has to, the political circus, is one of those things that they want to produce so that they get people involved and get people riled up and get people, feeling like, something's going to happen unless they do these crazy things. And then, it's interesting that you bring up the ERA, actually, because I think that's always been a really interesting fight over the Equal Rights Amendment, because it was presented in the 70s originally, the Equal Rights
Yeah, something
Amendment.
like that. Yeah.
I can't remember when it exactly was, but it never passed, as far as I
Right.
know. But the reason it didn't pass is
They're
because,
one or two states short, right?
yeah,
They're
you could write an Equal Rights Amendment that just says all people of all races, of all genders, of all anything are all equal. And I can actually see the value in passing that because, there is antiquated language in our Constitution and Bill of Rights is referring to all men are created equal.
right.
So if you wanted to pass something and just say that says all people are equal, right?
Period.
Why not?
Right.
And if you kept it simple like that, who exactly is going to vote against something that says all people are equal and are equal in the eyes of the law? But when they come up with this legislation, it's always like, okay, you have the first line which says all people are created equal, and then you have 10,000 other lines of people trying to sneak in stuff that they're trying to write into the Constitution. And instead of just getting what you want, which is all people are equal, the bill won't pass now because 150 different, groups are all trying to get some kind of weird, addition to the, Constitution put in with the amendment. And so it doesn't pass, and it's stupid.
No, that's a really good point. I never thought about that, but that's exactly the way to get to that is, again, we tend to overcomplicate things, it seems like, right? And ultimately that is the goal. And I understand they want to make sure that there's this carve out kind of for women, but do you really want to carve out? Actually, you don't want to carve out. You want everybody to be equal, period.
Yep, and that's it.
It'd be a really short amendment.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because it's interesting because you were talking about this, and also in relation to the abortion law in New York, because one position that I've always thought would be a good position to have as a third party would be that you would push to have a constitutional amendment passed which says the following: abortion is legal in the first trimester. And that's the entire constitutional amendment. If anyone wants to mess around with anything post first trimester, fine, let them do it. But I'd be willing to bet that if you presented that and that only as a constitutional amendment, you would probably get it passed and you could solve all the questions about abortion basically anywhere. Because something like 98% of abortions occur in the first trimester. So you just took care of 98% of abortions, and late-term abortions, which is controversial, are gone, unless states want to have state regulations about it. If states want to lengthen it beyond, the first trimester, they can do that too. But, it settles the issue. And because it's a constitutional amendment, you're no longer subsequent to strange court rulings or whether. But you have to have it really simple so that people can look at it and say, okay, yeah. So in the first trimester, if a woman becomes pregnant and she doesn't want to be, she's got, I always try and remember the number of weeks. It's 12 weeks or something, like 16 weeks that she has to, make a decision about what she wants to do. And since 98% of abortions occur in that period of time anyway, and from a health standpoint, having late-term abortion is not smart for women.
No, optimal anyway.
It becomes a much more complicated process. So by, making that, constitutional, well, done.
Make that the baseline.
Right.
And then, because again, the whole controversy over late-term abortions and all that, for some cases, it's a necessary thing to save the woman's life and all those kinds of things, or for the rape and incest things and all that. But in those cases, a lot of rape and incest ones, they're going to know, right?
Yeah, emergency contraceptive immediately. And when you go to the emergency room after a rape or, a case of incest or whatever, that's usually common practice anyway. So, you immediately take care of it. Hopefully, pregnancy doesn't ever occur at all.
Right.
Done.
Exactly.
And as I say, it's incredibly simple. It's literally a one-sentence amendment to the Constitution. Incredibly straightforward. And as I say, I think you'd have overwhelmingly huge support for it.
Yes. Yeah. No, good point. No, I like that. Anyways, what else is going on? I have another rant, but I've already ranted once, so I'll let you rant this time.
Okay, so mine is more of a question because I've been thinking about these protests that have been going on the college campuses that have been getting unruly, and then they clear out the protests of the people camping on the campus, and they find all kinds of damage and graffiti and all kinds of stuff going on, and then but just completely putting aside Palestine versus Israel debate,
Right.
there has been some reporting that there are paid protesters,
Oh
essentially
yeah.
professional organizers
Yeah.
in these groups that are sort of stoking the fires and providing tents, providing signage, all that stuff.
Right.
And so my question is, like, I'm someone who really supports protesting and the right to assemble and all those things. But I wonder, because I've been kind of thinking about it, it's like once you have an outside group who's essentially funding professional agitators, how does that affect, where you stand on the whole free speech aspect of it? I mean,
Right.
could these people be liable? I mean, if you're funding agitators and then the group that they're agitating does damage to a campus or injures a police officer or something like that, are the funders of the agitators now liable for what went on, or is it all just under the rubric of free speech?
Well, yeah. I mean, those people are just anarchists. I mean, they're just trying to tear things down just to tear things down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and no, it's a good question. I mean, I think they're. Well, I think we'll find out when this whole January 6th,
Sixth.
assault on the Capitol, if that ever gets really sort of brought to fruition,
Mm-hmm.
because that's kind of an example of that, because there were some, I guess you would say agitators there
Yeah.
that either are part of a club
Mm-hmm.
or being paid and all that kind of stuff, because it does become a kind of constitutionally sticky in a way.
Yeah.
Um, just because somebody pays for it, is that
Yeah.
because you could go back and say you could say that about any kind of political speech,
Right.
right? Because those of us who were very concerned about Trump, a lot of what he says is protected political speech, but it
Mm-hmm.
also, in some people's views, really engenders others to do things that are very destructive.
Yeah. And then there was I want to say that it was the Citizens United decision
Hmm.
where essentially the Supreme Court ruled that campaign contributions were considered political speech.
Yep.
And so if a if a financial contribution to a campaign is considered political speech, then wouldn't you also say that a contribution to hire agitators for a protest is also a form of free speech,
Yeah.
and therefore
Yeah.
not you're not liable for anything that goes on during the protest?
Yeah. No, exactly. That's kind of where I'm going with it, because, and as much as I think it's just awful, and but at the same time, it is, until they change Citizens United, again, going back to the law of the land right now,
Right,
in my mind, you can't go, and now you might arrest individuals for
mhm,
actually breaking windows or whatever,
right, doing actual damage.
the actual damage. But as far as if they were paid to do it, those that paid for it,
Yeah,
their position's always going to be, well, we weren't paying them to do that.
yeah,
We were
and
paying them
that's
to
what I
protest.
say. That's why I think it's interesting. But I mean, you hear the possibility that some of the people who are funding this are well, like George Soros, billionaire level,
Right.
people. So if you have a police response for the city of New York that costs
Oh my God.
50 million dollars or whatever for
It's crazy.
everything that goes on. Well, I mean, some of the people that are funding the protests and causing the damage would be in a position to actually reimburse police departments and cities for the damage that's being done. So
Right.
if you could sue them and they actually were had libel, they
Yeah.
were they you could sue them for that, then you could reclaim a whole bunch of the money that you lost in trying to put an end to whatever unrest or rioting that was going on. So I just think it's kind of an interesting thing. But again, I'm not sure really where it really fits in on the whole free speech spectrum, because it's kind of out there.
Well, I don't know. I would fall to the side of it is free speech based on Citizens United, and because you know what the response is going to be. It's like, well, we might have paid him, but we didn't pay him to do that.
Yeah.
So, so until we can't come up with some more practical, Citizen United response, because to me, the fact that people can donate literally unlimited amounts of money and not anonymously, and I don't think I think people should be able to donate unlimited amounts of money. I don't have an issue with that. The issue is the anonymous part.
Yeah.
Because you need to know where it's coming from, right?
Yeah.
So with all the PAC money that goes on and the dark money that goes on, you have no idea really who's behind any of this stuff.
Yeah,
it's kind of like, hey, if it's kind of like the nonprofit world, like churches and stuff. It's like, well, they're not going to be taxed because, they're not supposed to engage in political speech. Well, obviously, a lot of them do. But it falls into that same idea. We need to kind of make this a lot clearer in my mind that, hey, if somebody's behind it financially, we should know who that person is.
Yeah. And I think one of the problems that in the whole, election funding issue is the idea that the law now allows these PACs to be created. The idea that you can hide behind like a third party, because, when a candidate declares, where it's getting its funding from, it just says the PAC. I got my money from, Go America PAC or whatever it is. And then you're like, okay, well, what I don't know, Go America PAC is, so I don't know. Right. And so you never really have to disclose, well, Go America PAC was funded by, this person, that person, and somebody else.
Right.
And it's like, that's just a dumb way of doing things. Just, if they're all going to give money to a candidate, and just give money to the candidate, and then the candidate has to say, okay, I took money from this person. And then we have a better idea about where people stand. So this whole obfuscation of everything, I've never been particularly fond of.
No. And that's what it really proliferated. I mean, there was always PACs, but once they got the Citizens United kind of overturned, it just went crazy. I mean, the fact that, because this is always, this is how we met, is because I get so aggravated over the whole campaign finance thing. But it's like, for a congressperson who makes, what is it, $235,000 a year, something like that. Yeah, low 200s, and they'll spend $8-10 million. Oh,
I know, it's crazy
in a campaign. It doesn't make any sense. And, and let alone you look at a presidential election, and what a president makes, $400,000, I think. And they're going to spend, each of them are going to spend at least $1 billion. It's even
it's like
more out of whack.
Yeah. The thing that gets me about that whole thing is, think about it. So if the two campaigns combined are going to spend $2 billion, think what you could do with that $2 billion. You could do a lot of good with that.
Yeah.
I mean, but we're spending it on just garbage advertising, to insult each other. Right. I mean, that's like, geez, you got to be kidding me.
One of the things I'm curious at watching, I'm just starting to watch it now, is Mexico is getting ready for its general elections in June. I think it is mid-June, and they have, like a lot of European countries, and I think maybe Canada does this too. There's a short period of time when you're allowed to campaign. You can't be, so it's like in Mexico, I think they have like a 90-day window where they can campaign up to election day. So you're not just getting this constant barrage of stuff. And that's when most things happen anyways. Yeah. And that would be at least one simple way to at least start to scale it back a bit, but at the end of the day, I think it all comes back to PACs, and everybody should have an equal ability to contribute. And some people are only going to be able to contribute $5, and some can contribute $5,000. So keep it at a fairly high level, but people need to know who's supporting who.
Yeah. And I think you're right, though. I like the idea of limiting campaigns to a period of time, because the thing is, it's like, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And I mean, the big thing is, it's like media coverage. I mean, how much is the media coverage worth? I mean, like, I've been watching and trying to keep track a little bit of what's going on with some of the Trump trials. And the idea that Trump, before every day that he goes into court, essentially has a small press conference for free.
Yes,
And
exactly.
then that little mini press conference makes it all over the news and everywhere else. I mean,
It's great.
you couldn't buy that. I mean, there's no
Couldn't buy
way.
it. Absolutely not.
So as
Yeah,
they say, it's like that kind of coverage. Even if you limited the amount of campaigning time you had, as far as like running ads or whatever, because so much of a campaign just is in whatever the news is covering. It would be hard to limit, but I like the idea because I've always felt like the way you limit donations to candidates is you take away their candidate's ability to spend all the money, right?
right.
If it costs $1 million to run for the short period of time that you're allowed to run for, but you acquire $1 billion that you can't really spend on anything, then
Right.
what's the point? So I
Yeah.
mean, you can limit the amount of money that candidates would want to take by limiting the amount of money that they could spend, and then you would simultaneously limit the amount of influence people had over them. Because if you could have raised the amount of money that you were able to spend through small donations, then you wouldn't need the big donations. So
That's right.
if you could manage a way to do that to reduce the actual spending on campaigns, that would really be a good way to go.
Yeah. Well, and that's, you would hope that we would set up a campaign finance mechanism that incents for that versus
Right.
incents for what it is now, which is get the really rich people to plow in tons and tons of money, right?
Yeah.
And I think what it would also help is stop fueling the industrial media complex.
Hmm.
And being a former journalist in a former lifetime myself, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to say it, but it's become so bastardized. I
Yeah.
mean, the best thing for MSNBC is Donald Trump,
Oh,
and the best thing for Fox is Joe Biden,
yeah.
because they just play their little clips and stuff over and over and have these big raucous, arguments over stuff because it fuels viewership. And again, if we had that limited time window and all those kinds of things, it would just sort of clamp down on that because it's just feeding into the frenzy.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like they spend so much money on these campaigns, but I mean, geez, I mean, I'm not even just sure what the value of it even is. I mean, are we better off as a society for billions of dollars of campaign spending in a year? I mean, it's awful.
Yeah. And I know it's a big country and you can't go and shake everybody's hand and all that. So I understand media plays a role in all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's now become such a production that, I mean, look at Trump. I mean, hey, give him credit. He's never been what they would call a retail politician. He does everything by these big, huge group things, or a lot of just being able to generate his own media, whether through a trial or saying something goofy or whatever. And he doesn't go out and really shake hands a whole lot, kind of thing. And it's just become a big show. And again, he's better at it than I think a lot of others. But very few, once you get to that level, do it.
Yeah.
You don't really get to know your local representative, let alone a senator or president or anything like that these days.
Yeah. And I think that actually goes back to all the trial that's going on in New York right now. I think some of the best political imagery that Trump has ever done, the smartest political campaigning he's ever done, because he gets one day off from the trial. He's been doing things in New York. He went to, I think it was a fire station in New York. He went to a bodega in New York. And it's like people are cheering and he's talking to people out on the street. And it's like, that's the best campaigning he's ever done. All because he's stuck in New York and has a trial. So because he's been going around to different places in New York. So, I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I can never, I just can't stand the guy, but at the same time, you have to respect him for his ability to basically manipulate people in as far as getting the kind of coverage that he gets. People would, any other politicians, I think, really are, while they may not like him, I think more than that, I think they're jealous of him because he's been so accomplished at getting free media.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, whether you agree with, and I certainly don't agree with him, but you have to respect the fact that he does own the airwaves.
Yeah.
and we allow it.
Well,
The
he's the
media
modern
allows it.
P.T. Barnum. There's no such
Yeah,
thing as bad publicity.
that's right. That's right. And and again, it goes back to the media. They're part of the environment, right?
Mhm.
So, um, I understand why people are skeptical somewhat of the mainstream media, just because it has become such a game,
Yeah.
and it's no longer, hey, let's have an honest discussion about stuff. So again, let's hope our little thing, hopefully, just sort of promotes that, and hopefully lots of other people do the same thing,
Yeah.
and just start having rational discussions out there instead of listening to people who we shouldn't have to be listening to other people for our opinions. We should figure out our own opinions on our own.
Right. But the real problem is that it's hard to have an opinion if you don't have access to facts.
Right.
You're never basically it's like if you don't know what the actual problem is, you'll never solve a problem. And so it's like when different groups of people are dealing with quote unquote different facts, even though there's always only one set of facts. Some people are being lied to from whoever, but it's like you can't make any kind of headway or have any kind of conclusion that has any kind of substance, if you don't have access to facts. And I've always
Yep.
said that that's one of the most important reasons for having a third party is because you could have essentially a truth teller, a party that would be invested in being like, okay, we're just going to try and give you the facts. We're going to look at the numbers. We're going to report them. We're going to, sort through all this, political journalistic lingo that people keep throwing out. And we're going to try and have a sensible way of people understanding what's actually going on and try and present them with the actual, options that, they're going to have. And, I think a third party could really go a long way to, doing something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to that point, that was kind of one of my other mini rants. I was at an event on Monday, which was kind of that brought in a bunch of economists talking about the local economy and what's going on
Mm.
and all that kind of stuff. And going back to the truth tellers thing again, where a third party could really play a role there. Is after I was listening to these economists and stuff, they all admitted basically a year ago they got it all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They were expecting us to be in a recession right now.
Yeah.
And it's looking like, well, things are going to get a little choppy, but we're probably not going to go into a recession. So it kind of confirmed some suspicions we always have had about economists. It's more of an art than a science.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they, to their credit, they were basically trying to be truth tellers to say, hey, here are the facts as we know from economic indicators of what's happening, and it was stuff that probably a lot of people don't hear, or they don't want to hear, depending on what channels they're listening to,
Yeah.
and that would be one area where, again, a third party, whether it's the economy, whether it's whatever social issue, whatever the facts are when it comes to whatever military spending,
Mm-hmm.
just get down into the real facts and be honest about it, good,
Yeah.
bad, or indifferent. And
Yep.
I mean, that would be such a huge role for a third party, and it'd be so refreshing because people I think are anxious to hear what is real.
Yeah. Because I think that, one thing that a party, in this day and age, a third party could really do would just be to establish the difference between what is a fact and what is an opinion. Because so many people come out and state things as fact or claim that they're talking about facts, and they're really just opinions.
Right.
And, even something simple like that, just to stand up in front of, you've got the Republicans saying one thing, the Democrats saying one thing, and say, look, it's fine that everyone has their opinion, and opinions are important in this way or that way. But these aren't facts. The facts are much simpler. These are the facts.
Right.
And these are the opinions. You can have your own opinion based on these facts, but these are the facts. And
Yep.
so many politicians, don't want to talk about facts. They just want to talk about their opinions about things.
Exactly. Well, and they're just playing off of emotions more than anything because they
Yeah.
know that's what motivates people. And I get it. I'm in marketing, and it's fear, greed, or sex. That's what motivates everybody. And
that should be the slogan for our party: fear, greed, or sex.
no, that's what motivates everything in everybody's world. And politicians tend to rely on fear mostly these
Yeah,
days.
these days for sure.
And but That it is. I think that's probably the best way for a third party to differentiate itself. Is I like the label of the truth teller kind of role, because people want it. I really do think people are hungry for that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're never going to convince the people on each end of the spectrum, of the current spectrum, but there's a big chunk of the people in the middle. Hey, I just want to know what's going on.
Yeah. Because the important thing too is, if you really, when you really start drilling down into this issue, is that when presented with a certain set of facts, there isn't necessarily a right opinion. It's just like you were talking about the economists and how economists got it wrong. I'm sure there were some economists out there somewhere who probably had it right, and many others who had it wrong. And the thing is, if you have the facts, then you can look at people's opinions and decide, okay, do these opinions seem to make sense with the facts that we have? And what are they really trying to say about these opinions? How things are going to go forward, how things are going to change, all that kind of stuff. But it's like, if you don't start with the basic facts, you can't even evaluate people's positions on things because you don't know what the facts are.
And the reality is, most topics, there are truly some facts. It's not like, there's some things like, I don't know, you talk about maybe some mental health issues or something. It's sort of a mystery still today. We don't have enough science behind it yet to understand some things that go on in our brains. But most things, there are facts.
Yeah.
And facts are facts. And I think that's a great way for a third party to differentiate itself. I like that.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, we better start closing this up and getting ready for a new week.
Yeah. Well, that was all good. I'm sorry about last week, but I would have been coughing the whole show, so it wouldn't have been great.
Yeah, no. Got us all, I think probably got us refreshed. Got us I makes me realize again that how much I kind of need this for my therapy session, right? So a week I had a lot of stuff I had to get off my chest.
Well, as I say, again, glad to do it. I'll always say this for the entire time that we do this podcast. I'm just glad to be here. It's fun. It's great for me, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to do it with you.
Sounds good, man. Talk to you next week.
Yep. See you then.